The backstage area smelled like recycled air and nervous sweat. Commander Lyra pressed her 4 fingers against the cool metal wall, trying to steady her breathing. Through the doorway ahead, she could hear thousands of voices creating a low, rumbling sound that made her stomach twist into knots. A young protocol officer rushed past, nearly dropping a stack of data tablets. He nodded at her with wide eyes full of respect. Everyone looked at her that way now. The hero, the code breaker, the soldier who helped end the Void War. They pinned the Star of Valor on her chest 3 days ago, and the weight of it felt heavier than any weapon she had ever carried. Lyra glanced down at the speech notes glowing on her wrist display. Standard military ceremony language. Thank the Assembly. Praise the Coalition forces. Share some tactical details about cracking the Ravager communication codes. Accept applause. Smile for the cameras. She had practiced it 17 times in her quarters, and it sounded perfect every single time. But her hands kept shaking. The Grand Assembly Hall stretched out beyond that doorway like an ocean of faces. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered to hear her speak. The Passion Concordat, her own people, had sent their finest diplomats. Everyone expected inspiration. Everyone wanted to hear about glory and victory and the triumph of civilization over chaos. Nobody wanted to hear the truth. A chime sounded. The protocol officer appeared at her side again. Commander Lyra, they are ready for you now. The Galactic Assembly awaits your address. She followed him through the doorway, and the noise hit her like a physical force. Cheering, applause, the clicking of mandibles and the whistling of breathing tubes and sounds she could not even name. Floating holographic displays showed her face magnified 100 times, broadcast to every corner of the hall and transmitted across dozens of star systems. The podium stood in a circle of light at the center of the massive chamber. Lyra walked toward it on legs that felt made of something other than bone and muscle. Her hooves clicked against the polished floor. All those eyes watching. All those species who fought together, bled together, mourned their dead together. And she was about to tell them something that would make them question everything. The applause died down as she reached the podium. Silence settled over the chamber like a blanket. Lyra looked out at the tiers of seats rising up in every direction. Kronar diplomats in their ceremonial shells. Felton traders with their silver fur gleaming under the lights. A delegation of Miss Na floating in their containment spheres. And there, in the human section, she spotted a familiar face that made her heart ache. David Reed sat in the third row, smiling at her with that infuriating human warmth. Even from this distance, she could see his eyes crinkling at the corners. He gave her a small thumbs-up gesture, something humans did to show support. She had learned dozens of their strange customs over the past 3 years. Too many, perhaps. The chief administrator's voice boomed through the hall. Distinguished members of the Galactic Assembly, it is my profound honor to introduce Commander Lyra of the Passion Concordat. As communications officer during the Void War, her brilliant work in decoding Ravager battle patterns turned the tide of conflict. Her courage saved countless lives. Please welcome our honored guest. More applause, more clicking and whistling and sounds of approval. Lyra placed her hands on the podium and felt the cool surface against her palms. Her wrist display showed the prepared speech, glowing softly. All she had to do was read it. 10 minutes of carefully crafted words that would satisfy everyone and change nothing. She looked at David again. He had taught her about human coffee, even though it tasted like bitter dirt to her. He had shown her pictures of Earth animals called dogs, creatures that followed humans around with devotion that seemed programmed into their DNA. He had cried in front of her when talking about his childhood pet, actual tears running down his face over an animal that died 20 years ago. That should have been her first warning. Lyra took a deep breath and turned off her wrist display. The prepared speech vanished. Somewhere in the audience, she heard a confused murmur. The chief administrator leaned forward slightly, concern crossing his aged features. "Thank you for this honor," Lyra began, her voice steady despite everything. "Thank you for gathering here today. Thank you for your service during the war and for your losses, and for your hope that we can build something better from the ashes of conflict." Standard opening. She could feel the audience relax slightly. Good. Let them think this would be normal. "But I am not here to talk about my heroism," she continued, and now her voice carried an edge that made several delegates shift in their seats. "I am not here to share tactical details or accept your praise or tell you comfortable stories about noble sacrifice." The murmuring grew louder. David's smile faded into a look of concern. Lyra gripped the podium harder. "I am here to warn you about the humans." Silence crashed down like a hammer. Even the translation devices seemed to pause for a moment, as if uncertain they had processed her words correctly. Lyra saw shock ripple through the crowd. The human delegation looked at each other in confusion. David's face had gone pale. The chief administrator started to stand, probably to interrupt, to smooth over this obvious mistake. But Lyra raised one hand, and something in her expression made him sink back into his seat. "During my time working alongside human forces," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall, "I discovered something. Something that terrifies me more than any weapon the Ravagers ever deployed. Something that keeps me awake at night, staring at my ceiling, wondering if we made a terrible mistake by inviting humanity into our galactic community." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Somewhere a delegate gasped. The holographic displays showed her face in extreme detail, capturing every emotion flickering across her features. Fear, sadness, and something else. Something that looked almost like grief. "The humans are not what you think they are," Lyra said quietly. "And what I witnessed during the war changed everything I thought I knew about the nature of friendship, loyalty, and the most dangerous force in the entire universe. Before I am done speaking today, you will understand why I stand here as both a decorated war hero and the person trying desperately to warn you about the species you are cheering for." The silence stretched like a physical thing. 10,000 beings held their breath, and Lyra, her hands steady now, her purpose clear, began to tell them the truth about humanity that nobody wanted to hear. "Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you about the day I met Corporal David Reed at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, and how everything I believed about war and enemies and the limits of compassion began to crumble into dust." 6 months before standing at that podium, Lyra had stepped off a transport ship onto the dusty surface of Outpost Sentinel with absolutely no idea what awaited her. The war against the Ravager swarm had been grinding on for 3 brutal years. 17 colony worlds consumed, millions dead. The Galactic Coalition forces were losing, slowly but certainly, like watching ice melt in the sun. Then the humans arrived. Nobody knew much about them. They came from a system the scouts had marked as too dangerous to colonize. Earth, they called it. A world where the weather tried to kill you, where microscopic organisms caused plagues, where the dominant species had clawed their way to the top of a food chain filled with monsters. The other species whispered about them. Deathworlders, survivors, warriors born from a planet that seemed designed to produce soldiers. Lyra expected something terrifying. What she got was Corporal David Reed, holding a cup of coffee. "Commander Lyra, welcome to Sentinel." He jogged toward her across the landing pad, his human face split into that wide expression they called a smile. His uniform looked rumpled and dusty, like he had been working all night, which she later learned he had been. "I am here to coordinate communication intercepts," Lyra said formally, keeping her distance. She had read the briefings about humans, aggressive, territorial, prone to violence. "Please direct me to the cryptography unit." "Absolutely, I will walk you there myself." David fell into step beside her, still holding that steaming cup. "I made coffee if you want some. Fair warning though, most non-humans find it disgusting. The Kronar delegate said it tasted like burned despair." Lyra found herself making a sound that was almost a laugh before she caught herself. Humans were supposed to be dangerous, not funny. The base sprawled across a rocky plateau under a purple sky, prefabricated structures connected by covered walkways, defense turrets scanning the horizon, soldiers from a dozen species moving with the exhausted efficiency of people who had been fighting too long. But something felt different here. It took Lyra several minutes to identify what. The human soldiers were singing. Not a war chant or a battle cry, just singing while they worked. Melodies that seemed designed for no purpose except to fill the air with sound. A group of them were reinforcing a barrier wall, and they sang something about a person named Johnny coming home. Their voices blended together in a way that made something in Lyra's chest tighten unexpectedly. "We brought about 40,000 personnel to this sector," David explained as they walked. "Mostly support roles, communications, medical, logistics, though our combat units are pretty effective too." He said it without pride or boasting, just stating a fact. "The Ravagers do not seem to know what to make of us yet." They reached the communications center, a low building packed with equipment that hummed and blinked. Inside, humans and aliens worked side by side, analyzing intercepts and decoding enemy signals. A Felton officer nodded at Lyra, relief clear in her silver eyes. "Thank the stars you are here, Commander. The Ravager codes keep shifting. We need your expertise desperately." Lyra settled into work, and for several hours she forgot about everything except the patterns scrolling across her screens. Ravagers communicated through complex chemical signals converted to electronic pulses. Breaking their codes required understanding not just their language but their entire way of thinking. It was what Lyra did best, what her species did best. The passion had always been scholars, not fighters. She was deep in analysis when David appeared at her workstation with food. "You have been at this for 5 hours straight," he said gently, setting down a tray. "Your file says passion need to eat every 4 hours or you get dizzy. I brought some ration packs that should be compatible with your biology. And water. And these little crunchy things the supply officer said you might like." Lyra stared at the tray, then at David. "You read my personnel file." "Well, yeah, you are part of my team now. I want to make sure everyone stays healthy and functional." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Is that weird? The Miss Na told me humans are weird about caring for people. Sorry if I overstepped." Before Lyra could respond, an alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the center. A voice crackled over the speakers. "Incoming wounded. Medical teams to Bay 3. We have captured enemy combatants as well." David's expression shifted instantly from friendly to focused. "That is my other job. I help process captured Ravagers. Want to come see how we handle prisoners?" Everything Lyra knew about military procedure said she should stay at her station, but curiosity pulled at her like gravity. She followed David through the corridors to a heavily secured section of the base. Armed guards stood at every checkpoint. Through reinforced windows, she could see holding cells. And in one of those cells crouched a Ravager. The creature was smaller than the warriors Lyra had seen in combat footage. A scout, probably. Its dark purple exoskeleton was cracked in several places, leaking the thick fluid Ravagers used for blood. 6 limbs folded beneath it in a defensive posture. Its compound eyes darted around the cell with what looked like pure terror. David palmed open the cell door. "Wait," Lyra grabbed his arm without thinking. "That is an enemy combatant. It could be dangerous. Scout here is secured and injured. Not much of a threat right now." David picked up a medical kit and a container of something that smelled faintly sweet. "Besides, I am not going to just leave the poor thing in pain and scared." Poor thing. He called the enemy that had helped destroy 17 worlds a poor thing. Lyra watched through the window as David entered the cell. The Ravager's mandibles clicked in clear threat display, but David just sat down, slowly and carefully, keeping his hands visible. He opened the container and pushed it toward the Ravager. "I know you are scared," he said in a soft voice. "I know everything hurts. This is food, your kind of food. We analyzed the chemical composition and synthesized it, not trying to poison you, just trying to help." The Ravager did not move. Its mandibles kept clicking. David waited. "I am going to call you Scout," David continued, like he was talking to a frightened child instead of a creature designed by evolution to be a perfect killing machine. "Because you were out scouting when our patrol found you. Scout is a good name. It means someone who explores and learns, someone brave enough to go into unknown territory." 20 minutes passed. David just sat there talking quietly, occasionally pushing the food container a bit closer. The Ravager's clicking slowed. Its defensive posture relaxed slightly. And then, moving so carefully it seemed afraid of its own motion, one of its limbs reached out and touched the container. Lyra felt something cold settle into her stomach. She had spent years studying enemy psychology. She knew about interrogation techniques and how to break an opponent's will. What she was watching was not that. What she was watching was something far more disturbing. David was trying to make friends with it. Over the next 3 weeks, Lyra found herself watching the humans with the same intensity she usually reserved for enemy code patterns. It started as professional curiosity. Understanding your allies made tactical sense, but it quickly became something else. Something closer to anthropological fascination mixed with growing horror. The pattern was everywhere once she knew to look for it. Lieutenant Anya Petrov ran the medical bay with ruthless efficiency. Lyra went there one morning to get a standard immunization update and found Anya carefully bandaging a Ravager warrior that had been captured during a skirmish. The creature had killed 3 coalition soldiers before being subdued. Its exoskeleton bore clear marks of combat damage. "Hold still, sweetie," Anya murmured, her hands gentle despite the creature's size. "I know the antiseptic stings. Just a few more seconds and we will get you into a healing pod." "Sweetie," she called a war criminal sweetie. The Ravager made a low clicking sound. Anya responded with clicks of her own, crude and badly pronounced, but recognizable. She was trying to speak its language. "You are learning Ravager." Lyra could not keep the shock from her voice. Anya looked up and smiled. Just basic phrases. Yes, no, hurt, help, food. Enough to make them feel less scared. Being injured and surrounded by aliens must be terrifying. She secured the bandage and patted the Ravager's carapace like it was a nervous pet. "There you go, all done, see, not so bad." The Ravager's mandibles twitched in a way that Lyra was learning to recognize as confusion rather than aggression. Private Omar Hassan worked in the linguistics division, analyzing intercepted communications. Lyra started bringing him samples of particularly complex Ravager transmissions. He attacked each one with enthusiasm that bordered on joy. "This is beautiful," Omar said one day, staring at a chemical signature pattern. "Look at how they layer information. Primary message in the dominant pheromones but emotional context in the trace elements. Like how humans use tone of voice on top of words. Sophisticated as hell." "They are the enemy," Lyra reminded him. "They have destroyed entire civilizations." "Yeah, and that is horrible." Omar did not look away from his screen. "But their communication system is still beautiful. Those two things can both be true." He highlighted a section of the code. "See this? This is how they express something like grief. When a hive cluster loses members, they broadcast this specific combination. It means they mourn their dead, Commander, just like we do." Lyra went back to her quarters that night and started making notes. Not about codes or tactical patterns, about humans. Observation 1. Humans form emotional attachments to other species at an alarming rate. Observation 2. These attachments appear genuine, not strategic. Observation 3. The attachments persist even when the other species is actively hostile. She pulled up historical files about Earth, looking for context. What she found made her notes grow longer and more disturbed. Humans had domesticated hundreds of species on their homeworld, but domestication was the wrong word. The files showed a different pattern. Humans did not just tame animals, they integrated them into human social structures. Dogs, the files explained, were descended from wolves. Wolves, pack predators that could kill a human easily. Somehow humanity had convinced these creatures to not just coexist but to love them. The files showed images of humans with their dogs. The animals looked at humans with what could only be described as adoration, and the humans looked back the same way. Cats, horses, birds, rats. Humans kept all of them, formed bonds with all of them, grieved when they died. One historical document described something called the extinction of the passenger pigeon. Billions of birds hunted to nothing, and humans had mourned, created laws, changed their behavior, all because they felt guilty about making a species disappear. They felt guilty about birds. Lyra attended a briefing 2 days later where human commanders outlined their strategy for the next offensive. General Patricia Wong stood at the front, a woman with gray-streaked hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much combat. Our primary objective is to disable their command node without excessive casualties, Wong explained. On either side, coalition or ravager, every life we can preserve, we preserve. A Kronar officer raised one armored claw. General, the ravagers do not show us the same courtesy. They consume entire populations. Why should we limit our effectiveness out of concern for their casualties? Wang's expression hardened. Because we are not them. We do not become monsters just because we fight monsters. Every ravager we kill is one less we might save later. The room fell silent. Save, not defeat, save. Lyra started spending her free time at the holding facility, watching David work with Scout. The Ravager had stopped clicking defensively weeks ago. Now it responded to David's voice, moved toward him when he entered the cell, and had even started making sounds that seemed almost conversational. I have been teaching Scout standard language, David told her during one visit. The translation matrix works both ways. Scout wants to communicate. I think the Ravagers might not be a true hive mind. I think they are individuals forced into collective behavior by their biology. If we could break that connection somehow, help them develop individual identity. You want to recruit them, Lyra said slowly. I want to free them, David corrected. There is a difference. He looked at Scout through the transparent barrier. Nobody should be forced to be a weapon, not even our enemies. That night, Lyra filed a request to extend her deployment at Sentinel. Her official reason was that she needed more time with the codes. Her real reason was that she needed to understand what was happening. Because David had been at Sentinel for 4 months, and now there were 6 Ravagers in holding who responded to human voices, who took food from human hands, who had stopped trying to kill their captors and started acting like prisoners who were being offered something they did not have words for yet. Redemption, friendship, hope. The humans were weaponizing compassion, and they did not even seem to realize they were doing it. Lyra added another observation to her growing file. Observation 7. Humans believe anyone can change. They believe this so deeply that they act on it even when logic says otherwise. They extend trust to things that do not deserve trust, and somehow, impossibly, that trust creates the change they believe in. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever witnessed. The attack came 3 months into Lyra's deployment, sudden and overwhelming like a storm breaking over calm water. Ravager forces numbering in the thousands descended on Redoubt Station, a critical supply hub 50 kilometers from Sentinel. Coalition Command sent every available unit to reinforce the defenders. 200 soldiers against an army. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Lyra found herself in a transport with David, Anya, Omar, and a mixed squad of humans and aliens. The ride took 30 minutes, and David spent it checking equipment with hands that did not shake even slightly. How could he be calm? "First time in active combat," he asked her quietly. "I'm a cryptographer. I analyze patterns from safety." "You will be fine. Stay near me." That smile again, like he was inviting her to lunch instead of a battle that would probably kill them all. "We have a plan." The plan, Lyra discovered, was insane. Redoubt Station clung to the side of a cliff, protected by energy barriers and automated defenses. The Ravager swarm covered the approaches like a living carpet of purple chitin and clicking mandibles. The defenders were already exhausted, having held position for 6 hours before reinforcements could arrive. General Wang set up a command post in the station's central hub. Around her, screens showed tactical feeds of the approaching horde. Thousands upon thousands of Ravagers, driven by hive imperatives that knew nothing of mercy or retreat. "David, are you ready?" Wang asked. "Yes, General. Translation matrix is loaded. Chemical synthesizers are online. I can broadcast in full Ravager signal spectrum." He looked nervous now, finally, sweat beading on his forehead. Good. At least he understood the stakes. "Then do it. Give them the option." David climbed to the highest point of the station's external platform, above the barriers, fully exposed. Lyra wanted to scream at him to get down, to take cover, to stop being so stupidly brave. But she just watched as he activated the broadcasting equipment. The sound that came out was not sound at all. Chemical signals pulsed from emitters, converted to electronic waves, transmitted across every Ravager sensory frequency. Lyra could not hear it, but she could see its effect. The swarm hesitated. Thousands of Ravagers slowed their advance. Mandibles clicked in confusion. The unified movement fractured into pockets of uncertainty. David was speaking to them, actually speaking in their language, deeper than words, communicating in the chemical signals that governed their hive minds. And what he was saying made them stop. "I do not know if you can understand individual thought," David's voice carried over external speakers, translated for the coalition forces to hear. "I do not know if you are capable of choice separate from the collective, but I know you are alive. I know you feel. I know you can change." The swarm rippled like water disturbed by a stone. "We have your people here, scouts and warriors that we captured. We did not hurt them. We fed them. We learned their names. They taught us your language and we taught them ours. Some of them do not want to fight anymore. They want to exist as individuals, not as parts of a weapon." Lyra looked at the internal monitors. In the holding area, Scout and the other Ravagers were broadcasting their own signals, adding their voices to David's message. They were confirming his words, testifying. "You do not have to attack us. You do not have to die for objectives you did not choose. We are offering you a chance. Stop fighting. Come talk to us. Learn who you could be if you were free." For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The swarm remained frozen, thousands of individuals locked in a moment of impossible choice. Then one Ravager broke from the formation, then another, then hundreds. They did not attack, they just stopped, laid down their weapons, went still. Not all of them. Thousands kept coming, driven by hive imperatives too strong to break. But 3,000 Ravagers had chosen, had made an individual decision for the first time in their existence, and they chose not to kill. The battle that followed was brutal and short. Coalition forces fought with desperate efficiency against Ravagers who could not stop, who were slaves to biology and conditioning. Lyra huddled behind a barrier, watching energy weapons light up the purple sky, listening to soldiers scream and die. Beside her, David wept while firing his weapon, actual tears running down his face as he killed Ravagers who could not be saved. Each shot precise, each one necessary, each one breaking something inside him that Lyra could see cracking like glass under pressure. When it ended, 2 hours later, 40 coalition soldiers were dead. Over 7,000 Ravagers lay scattered across the battlefield, and 3,000 Ravagers sat in confused clusters, surrounded by human soldiers who were offering them water and medical attention instead of execution. Lyra walked through the aftermath in a daze. Anya was already treating wounded Ravagers, her medical team working without rest. Omar was setting up translation equipment, helping the surrendered Ravagers understand what had just happened to them. General Wang was coordinating with Coalition Command, trying to explain that they now had 3,000 enemy combatants who had defected. And David stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking out at the dead, his face wet with tears. "I am sorry," he was saying to no one, to everyone, to the corpses that could not hear him. "I am so sorry. You did not deserve this. You deserved better. You deserved choice." A Ravager approached him, one of the surrendered ones. It made a clicking sound, soft and uncertain. David turned, and the creature did something that made Lyra's blood run cold. It touched his face with one claw, gentle, mimicking the gesture it had seen humans use for comfort. "It is okay," the Ravager said through a translation device, its first words in standard language. "You tried, you gave us choice. That is more than we ever had." Lyra recorded everything in her files. Observation 15. Humans grieve for their enemies. Observation 16. Their grief is genuine and debilitating. Observation 17. They keep fighting anyway. Observation 18. Their compassion is not weakness. It is a weapon more powerful than anything in our arsenal, and they wield it with devastating effectiveness. 3 weeks later, integrated human Ravager units were fighting side by side against the Hive forces that refused to break free. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. Coalition Command did not know whether to be amazed or terrified. Lyra knew which one she was. The war ended 6 months after Redoubt Station, not with a final battle but with a cascading collapse of Hive cohesion. Everywhere humans went, Ravagers started breaking free, choosing individuality over collective consciousness, turning against the swarm that had enslaved them since birth. The Ravager Empire fractured into 1,000 independent groups, each trying to figure out what it meant to be a person instead of a weapon. Coalition Command declared victory. Celebration erupted across 47 worlds, but Lyra could not celebrate. She sat in her quarters at Sentinel, surrounded by months of observations and data, and understood with crystal clarity that the galaxy had just witnessed something far more dangerous than any military conquest. Humans had shown a slave species how to be free, and in doing so, they had demonstrated a power that made conventional warfare obsolete. She attended the memorial service for the Coalition soldiers who died at Redoubt, a massive gathering under twin moons, with representatives from every species that fought in the war. The names of the dead were read aloud, each one honored, each one mourned. Then David stepped forward and began reading Ravager names. Scout 7 Theta, who died protecting Lieutenant Chen from artillery fire. Warrior 9 Alpha, who carried wounded to safety before succumbing to injuries. Queen Fragment Zeta 3, who stayed behind to evacuate a medical station and was killed by her own Hive forces. Ravager names, on a memorial for fallen heroes, spoken with the same reverence as Coalition soldiers. Around the gathering, Lyra saw the surrendered Ravagers standing in silent formation. They had adopted a posture humans taught them, heads bowed, one claw over their center mass where humans put their hearts. They were mourning, learning grief from the species that freed them. One Ravager stepped forward when David finished. It was Scout, the first one David had befriended. Scout had grown over the months, learning language and customs, developing what humans called personality. Now Scout spoke in halting but clear standard language. "We remember our dead, we remember our friends, we remember humans who showed us we could be more than weapons." Scout's mandibles clicked softly. "We will never forget." David hugged Scout, just wrapped his arms around an alien creature covered in sharp chitin and held it like family. and Scout's limbs came up carefully, so carefully, returning the embrace. Lyra found her eyes wet. When did she start crying? After the ceremony, she found Anya in the medical bay, doing inventory on supplies that would be redistributed now that the war had ended. The medic looked tired but content, humming one of those human songs while she worked. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra said from the doorway. "Of course, Commander, come in." Lyra entered and sat on one of the examination tables, her hooves dangling. "Why do you care so much? About the Ravagers, about all of us. You barely know us. We are not your species, not your responsibility, but you treat everyone like they matter to you personally." Anya stopped working and turned to face her. "Because they do matter, you do matter." "But why?" "Because you are alive. Because you can feel pain and fear and hope. Because if I have the ability to help someone and I do not, then what kind of person am I?" Anya smiled. "My grandmother survived the Siberian winters by helping her neighbors. Everyone shared food, heat, resources. She used to say that humans evolved in groups because no one survives alone. We are built to care for each other. And once we learned that lesson, we could not stop applying it to everyone we met. Even enemies. Especially enemies, because enemies are just friends we have not talked to enough yet." Anya said it like it was obvious, like it was the simplest truth in the universe. Lyra pulled up her data files, months of observations. "I have been studying your species, trying to understand. I found something disturbing." "What did you find?" "Humans have integrated yourselves with other species on Earth for thousands of years. Dogs, cats, horses, even insects like bees that you keep and protect. You form emotional bonds with anything that stays near you long enough. You grieve for individual animals like they are family members. You created laws to protect species from extinction. You adopt creatures that have no biological relationship to you and treat them like your own children." "That is true," Anya acknowledged. "We do all those things." "Do you realize what that means?" Lyra's voice shook. "It means you are colonizers, not through force, through irresistible affection. You make other species love you and then they cannot exist without you. You are parasites of the social bond." Anya was quiet for a long moment. "Is that how you see us?" "I do not know how to see you. I have been here 9 months. I have watched you turn enemies into friends, watched you break hive minds through kindness, watched you cry for people who tried to kill you. And the worst part, the absolutely terrifying part, is that it worked. The Ravagers love you now. They would die for you. Some of them did die for you. And that scares you." "Yes, because I think I love you too." Lyra's voice cracked. "All of you. David and his stupid coffee. Omar and his enthusiasm for enemy linguistics. You and your care for everyone who comes through that door. I dream about you. I worry about you. I want to protect you. And I did not choose this. You just made it happen by being yourselves." Anya crossed the room and sat beside Lyra on the examination table. "For what it is worth, we love you too, Commander. You are brilliant and dedicated, and you have saved so many lives with your code breaking. David talks about you constantly, says you are the smartest person he has ever met." Lyra made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "That makes it worse, because now I have to go back to the Galactic Assembly and tell them what you are doing to all of us, and they will ask me if we should be afraid of humans, if we should limit your expansion, if we should protect ourselves from your friendship." "What will you tell them?" Lyra looked at Anya with tears running through her fur. "I will tell them the truth, that you are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and that we already lost to you the moment we let you be kind to us." The Grand Assembly Hall had fallen completely silent. Lyra stood at the podium, her testimony finished, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 10,000 beings stared at her, some in shock, some in confusion, some in what looked like dawning understanding. An elderly Kronar delegate rose slowly from his seat. His shell bore the scars of 100 battles, and his voice carried the weight of age. "Commander Lyra, Are you suggesting we should fear humanity, that we should restrict their expansion into our territories, that we should classify them as a threat to galactic stability? Lyra opened her mouth, closed it. How could she answer that honestly? Before she could speak, another voice rang out. I would like to address the assembly if permitted. David stood in the human section, his face pale but determined. General Wang beside him nodded permission. The chief administrator gestured for him to approach. David walked down the aisle between the tiered seats. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber. When he reached the central platform, he stood beside Lyra but did not touch her, respecting her space even now. I am Corporal David Reed, he said simply, the human that Commander Lyra has been talking about, and I want to say something if you will all listen. The chief administrator inclined his head. The assembly will hear you, Corporal. David took a breath. Everything Commander Lyra said is true. We do form bonds easily. We do extend friendship to almost anyone. We do grieve for our enemies and try to save them instead of destroying them. My grandmother had a saying. She said that the only way to have no enemies is to make them all into friends. So that is what we do. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. David continued. But Commander Lyra, you are wrong about one thing. We are not doing this to colonize you. We are not trying to control you or make you dependent on us. We are just being ourselves. And if that makes you care about us, if that creates bonds between our species, then maybe that is not a bad thing. Maybe that is exactly what the galaxy needs. A Felton representative stood. Corporal, do you deny that human influence is spreading rapidly across coalition space? That species who interact with humans begin adopting your customs, your language, your cultural practices? No, I do not deny that, David said. But is that really so terrible? Before the war, how many species actually talked to each other? Really talked, I mean. Shared food and stories and became friends. Most of you just traded and stayed separate. You were 47 species living in the same galaxy but not really together. We changed that, not through force, just through being friendly. General Wang stood and approached the platform. If I may add something, assembly members, human diplomatic philosophy is simple. We believe that understanding reduces conflict. We believe that friendship creates peace. We believe that anyone can change if given the chance and the right support. These beliefs are not weapons. They are how we survived on our own world long enough to reach the stars. The Kronar delegate spoke again. But the result is the same: human cultural dominance, human social structures spreading everywhere. You are changing the galaxy whether you mean to or not. Yes, David agreed quietly. We are. But look what we are changing it into. The Ravagers are free now. Species that never talked before are working together. The number of conflicts between coalition members has dropped by 70% since we joined. Is that really something to fear? Lyra found her voice finally. But you do not understand the power you have. You make people love you without even trying. You befriend anything, everything. I have watched you adopt war machines and turn them into individuals. I have watched you cry over enemies. I have watched you extend trust to things that tried to kill you. And it works. That is the terrifying part. Your friendship is a weapon more effective than any military force. Then let it be a weapon, David said, turning to face her. Commander Lyra, you are one of the smartest people I have ever met. You see patterns nobody else sees. And you are right that we change things. But ask yourself this. Are those changes making the galaxy worse or better? Lyra thought about Scout, who now taught linguistics at Earth University, about the 3,000 Ravagers who chose freedom, about the medical bay where Anya treated everyone with the same care, about Omar's joy in understanding alien languages, about funerals where enemies mourn together. Better, she whispered. The changes make things better. Then maybe that is enough. Maybe we do not need to be afraid of connection. Maybe we do not need to protect ourselves from caring about each other. David smiled at her, that same warm expression that had confused her 9 months ago. You said you love us, that it scares you. But Lyra, we love you too. All of you. Every species in this assembly. And love does not have to be frightening. The chief administrator stood. This assembly must decide how to proceed. Corporal Reed, Commander Lyra, please step down while we deliberate. They walked together back up the aisle. David's hand hovered near her shoulder, not touching, just close, offering comfort if she wanted it. Lyra found herself leaning slightly toward him despite everything. In the human section, Scout was waiting. The Ravager had been granted special permission to attend. Scout clicked softly, a sound Lyra now recognized as concern. You did well, Commander, Scout said in careful standard language. You told truth. Truth is important. I tried to warn them about you, Lyra said to David, about what you do to people. I know, and you were right too. We should understand the impact we have. David sat down, and Scout settled beside him in that strange cross-species friendship that should not work but somehow did. But understanding something does not mean fearing it. The assembly deliberated for 2 hours. Lyra sat between David and Scout, feeling the warmth of beings who cared about her, who she cared about in return. Omar brought her water without being asked. Anya checked if she was okay. General Wang nodded at her with respect. She was surrounded by humans and the Ravager they had freed, and she realized with absolute clarity that even if the assembly voted to restrict human expansion, it was already too late. The bonds were formed, the friendships were real, the love was genuine. Humanity had already won, not through conquest but through connection. The chief administrator's voice boomed across the hall. The Galactic Assembly has reached a decision.